Good morning and welcome to Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole, where we are rising in faith and thriving in purpose. Today, I am joined by Mr. Jamel Riley. Jamel Riley is a first year Master of Social Work student at the University of Texas at Arlington. Shout out to social work, deepening his expertise in trauma informed community mental health. For 5 years, he excelled in hotel finance, structuring multi-million dollar deals, yet longing to work more with direct human impact. That disconnect spurred a decisive pivot, into the mental health and substance use field, where he now channels his analytical acuity into learning how to assess person and environment to provide holistic healing to others. Fueled by personal encounters with family addiction and workplace marginalization, he advocates relentlessly for cultural responsiveness and accessible care in underserved communities. Welcome, Jamel.
Thank you. Wow, it's such a very warm introduction. Man, I don't think I've ever been introduced like that before.
It's different when you hear it, like when it's repeated back to you, right? Like, I did that. That's me. Like, yeah,
Yeah, I was like, I guess I was. I was like, she ain't lying. I need you to come speak on my behalf more often.
it just let me know. I'm happy. I can come around. I could be that. But I love this. Like, and even just reading your bio, my brain is just going off in so many ways when seeing how you're able to I'm just excited about your future, is what I'll say. I'll sum it up to see how you'll be able to, one, bring your business mind, right, into healing and social work, and then that this is personally driven. Like, this is such a unique path that I know God is about to do, like, just like such dope things through you.
Yeah. I am too. I'm excited. I think the uncertainty can be scary, but at the same time, of just knowing the level of impact that I'm going to have and just the experiences that I've had in life, everything from childhood to boardroom, and to be able to apply that knowledge to impact others and heal others. I'm looking forward to it to see how big I can do it.
Absolutely. Listen, when it's with God, it's gonna be real, real, real big. And a couple other things. So, Jamel, you're also a Morehouse man
I am.
and a member of Kappa Alpha Psi.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there other things we need to let the people know about you before we get into the serious business?
I am a Georgia State Panther. I am also a Georgetown Hoya.
Agreed up.
And then also, former Big Brother, former Mentors Care mentor. I think it's very important to be active in your community and leave an impact, a lasting impact on individuals' lives. So, out of those organizations in universities and colleges you named, I will say the most rewarding things are me being in the community. So I just want to make sure those things aren't left off.
Yes. And speaking of community, tell the people where you from, because y'all be real proud.
So, originally from Detroit, Michigan, 313 stand up.
Listen, that's so funny because my sis was on here. Uh, she goes to my church. She said the same thing, like 313 stand up. So I love it. I love the pride. And we all have that, and that's important to have. But like the D, y'all different.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all,
Hey,
y'all are
we feel
different.
different. But everyone from Detroit, they're a good person if you meet them
Automatically,
outside of Detroit.
being from Detroit, you're a good person automatically.
Yeah. If you make it outside of Detroit, yeah,
If
you're a
you
good
make it
person.
out. I'm just trying to
It's
think
some
about
good
who I
people
know from
inside.
Detroit. And that's like, were any of those bad people? Or like people that I'm like, and yeah, you're right. Maybe you're right.
Yeah. You never had a bad experience with a Detroit person.
Okay, so speaking of like getting out, today's episode is going to be focusing on becoming, right? Becoming you and finding your identity in God through some of life's toughest seasons. And so It can be quite a journey to really like do that. And I don't think it's a journey that ever like really and truly ends, right? Because God is constantly working in us. But also this journey, it could be one that's filled with clarity. It could be confusing. Sometimes we get confirmation and then other times we're being stretched or being like refined and like feel like we're walking through fire. But the beauty of it is that we come out unburned. We don't smell like smoke. We don't have soot on us because that's what God will do. And knowing who you are and God is a huge part of that process. And what allows you to make it through and give you the courage to make it through and to keep going. And so it can also be challenging as well and trying to stay grounded in your identity as you're going through these different spaces and places, right? We're going to have like a deep and honest conversation today, just really about what that means to walk confidently in your God given identity and how to stay rooted while still evolving and what to do once you've gained that clarity about who you are. All right. So, talk to me a little bit just like about your background and identity.
Man, where should I start? You want me to start from the Detroit days or
Okay, let's start from the beginning so that because if we're talking about becoming, right, we got to give the people a little bit of foundation.
okay. So, of listening to your description of, how people become. Like, is it through just a revelation? Is it through trials and tribulations or trial by fire? I definitely will say my life has started trial by fire.
Okay.
Just growing up on the east side of Detroit and just thinking in the 90s, you're still feeling the impacts of the crack epidemic and just being a child or a product of a substance abuser. And then also a product of someone who ran the streets. That created a very colorful environment for me growing up. Uh, Honestly, I can say that I've seen things as far as people using and shooting up, even to at one point of realizing of aiding my mother by getting tools to assist her with heroin use. And as a child, you do what is told of you to do because you have to listen to your parents, despite you not liking the result of what happens. And I think at that age, I'm roughly around 6 at this time.
Hmm.
I didn't quite understand what was going on, but I knew that I didn't like when mommy did this.
Yeah.
And so to acts of that, and then now being older and realize this is what was happening and this is the part you played in it, it's difficult. I will say I'm fortunate enough I don't hold any like shame or guilt in myself. And also no shame and guilt in where I come from or like my parents. But yeah, to even take a step back. So lost both of my parents, lost my dad when I was 3, um, to gun violence, and then my mom at the age of 8 to drug overdose.
Yeah.
In between that time of growing up in Detroit up to 8, of seeing things of dead bodies on the ground or unalived people, seeing just substance abuse very rapidly
Mm-hmm.
in my home and outside of my home. And then also didn't grow up in the most ideal conditions. I'll say, by the grace of God, I truly say by the grace of God, of having grandparents to be able to step in and to take care of me, my brother, is truly what helped me and saved me. And specifically my grandfather, because my grandfather, he was a old school guy from Mississippi, born and raised before moving to Detroit. And one thing he didn't play about was church.
Uh-huh.
From the time I moved into his house until I left to go to college, every Sunday, it doesn't matter what you do on Saturday, you up in the morning and you're in church.
Hmm.
I don't care if you're sick. I don't care if you're missing a toe or limb, like you're going to be in church. So I will say, like my whole adolescent years, I grew up in the church. And that created a great foundation. And then also, in some extent, served as a sense of therapy that I did not know I needed later in life. But it was through those foundations that I could even realize that.
Yeah, thank God for grandparents and just for family members that stepped in. So I, like you, have a history that includes parents that struggle with substance abuse, and didn't end up, growing up with them. I was my great aunt who raised me. So I can resonate with that. And I was really glad to hear you say that you weren't like experiencing like shame and guilt about aiding your mother. And the reality of it is you didn't know what you were doing. You were being an obedient son. You were doing what your mom told you to do. But there are some who could internalize that and allow that to really hold them hostage emotionally. So I'm glad to hear that and that you've done your work. So all right, the backdrop of Detroit and the this means Meech and Terry is running the streets and whomever else, right? Like for any to be a Myth fans or whatever. But this is your background, right? Like this is the backdrop you're growing up in. How do you, and then having this strong grandfather who's like not playing about it. How did you kind of like navigate that, right? Like whether it's what you would do outside of the home or like just socially, like approval versus like knowing who you are and going to church and like what's being put in you. So like how did you navigate that being in this really faith-filled home and then, what was happening outside of the home?
Yeah. I would say I definitely think it's pretty hard to or difficult to navigate the two. At home, it's pretty easy because your caregivers, they're there to love you and nurture you and care for you. So you don't have to put on any face to exist. However, like growing up in Detroit, you definitely have to put on a face in a sense, indoor, be okay with being an outsider. And for me, I just always had to be that outsider. I think luckily enough, I was social enough that, growing up as a kid, I was cool with all of the other kids growing up. So as we became older and we started to vary in paths, it wasn't a total disconnect with the kids in my neighborhood. It was like, oh yeah, we used to play together. So as they're going and like breaking into cars or they're going to like break into people's homes and robbing people, I was never a part of those things,
Mhm.
but also, whenever they see me out, they might have some jokes like, "Oh, there go Mel, the nerd," because, I always excelled in school, but it was never no type of, like, true tension between us. It was always a level of mutual respect. But I will say because I knew myself, I knew what I felt comfortable with and I knew what was right and I didn't waver from those things of my values and beliefs. It did cause me to be an outsider to my friends in the community. And I had to lean on those beliefs and values and be okay with being alone to make it out and or being different because I just recently took a trip back home to Detroit for Mother's Day, and I'm on the block, as you call it, or the neighborhood. And, everyone's always, whenever I come home, they're always like, "Yeah, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you." But these are the street people to be like, "Oh, you're the one that had it figured out. You're the one that had the plan." And like, we wish you would have took a page out of your book, but we're just like really happy to see that you're still going, you're still thriving.
Yeah. And so what we figure out, right? I think once we're on the other side, but as a kid, it does feel like you're different. You does feel like you're the outcast where others you can't, right? When in actuality, you were set apart. And they knew that too, right? And it's so, I remember some of the first times I've heard people say, I always knew you were different, or I always knew you were going to do amazing things. And it's just like, what you mean? What do you mean you just knew, right? Like, because you're figuring it out. You know you're different, but you're just doing what is true to you, what feels good to you as well. But how does that feel now? Or like, at what point did you figure out that you were set apart?
Oh, well, I think early on, I just knew that I was different. No one wants to be different. Definitely thinking as a child, like you want that level of acceptance of like thinking of just like even the lifespan development theory, where it's like it's that middle childhood starting at early as the age of 6, where you're looking for that level of acceptance from your peers, from your parents, in your community. To not have that is pretty difficult. But I'll say for me, I think that just always was a recurring theme throughout my life. So it didn't just stop once I went to Cass Tech, where I was aligned with like-minded individuals that were like strong and champions of education.
Okay.
It was the same at Morehouse. It was the same when I went to corporate America, um, and just my overall adult life. So I think with knowing that, I think I became comfortable once I got to college of being different and not going with the status quo.
Good, good. So like when you're talking about these different stages of your life, right, that you went into, how were you able to stay anchored in that? Like as you're being tested, going through these different seasons of life, whether it's culture, relationships, you know. Yeah, how are you able to stay anchored in your identity?
I think it's important first and foremost to know yourself. You have to know what you believe in. You have to know your values, because if you don't know your values and beliefs, like, you will believe anything. You will champion anything. So of knowing that first and foremost, it makes it easier. And then just taking an assessment of like, hey, I'm in this environment based on my beliefs and my values and my goals. Is this environment or relationship, is it conducive to that or not? And, if it's not, then for myself, I create boundaries. And I will say that boundaries are really important if you are trying to go anywhere, if you're trying to achieve goals, if you're trying to keep a peace of mind and just better yourself. Boundaries, which I've had to set to family members, friends, employers, and they're really there. One, to protect me, but also to protect you.
Mhm.
Because I had a situation with me and a friend, and I explicitly stated my boundaries. And, he was taken back because he was used to overstepping those boundaries. But I had to realize I had never communicated those to him before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is why he was shocked. And I told him, like, hey, these boundaries are set here so I don't have a level of resentment towards you and we can have a healthy relationship. Now, if they don't work for you, then I can understand that and then we need to take another course of action. But I'm a huge like champion of boundaries.
That's one of my favorites. And so we're gonna have you back and we're gonna have an episode just on boundaries.
Okay.
Because boundaries, that's a whole thing, and there are so many people who are programmed to have low or no boundaries, and they don't even know that that's what's happening, or people don't know what boundaries are, or they've been conditioned and been in environments where that's what's been happening in their family life, and then they go out and then they do that in their friendships, their romantic relationships. They do these things at work, and people will allow it. And I think there can be like a certain level of awareness, right? If you, depending on what the boundary is, and if it's something that's going to benefit you, and you apply a little pressure, right? Like, let me persuade you a little bit, right? But when it's clearly communicated, that's really important. And then I also think when sometimes people who push boundaries, they don't always have boundaries, and then they're surprised when a person does set a boundary. And it's like, "How dare you? I would never do that to you, but I wouldn't be asking you to do that on the other side of it, right?"
Right.
And I wanna go back a little bit further. So you started this out and you were saying to know yourself. So somebody's like, "Well, how do you know yourself?" Right? Like, and especially if this is a person who may be a little bit lost in that, or maybe their guidance, their upbringing didn't support their the identity that God put in them. So you get what I'm saying? So yours has been clear for you. What would you say to a person who maybe it's a little more murky for it to get to knowing self?
First and foremost, I'll say trust your intuition. Your stomach, your gut would tell you everything that you need to know. And just think about what makes you feel comfortable. What the values align with you. So if you like respect, you like being treated kind, that is something that's a value of yours. That is something that you hold in high regards. If you like service, then that's something that's high on your priority list. Also, I'll say look at like your interests. So your interests would tell you what your values are.
Tell me more about that. I like where this might be going.
Yeah. So like one of the big things for me is community service, where it's like, okay, so like my one of my values is giving back to others because I truly enjoy helping others through mentorship or through advocacy work or through just like community beautification projects where, that would be a thing. Let's see another interest where it's okay, reading. I like reading a lot or listening to podcasts or audiobooks. And it shows like a thirst for knowledge and also a sense of being open minded. So, of okay, you like to read, so you like to get a lot of different perspectives. So, you might not get along with someone who's closed minded, or it might be a little bit more friction if you're interacting with someone closed minded, if you're open minded. But I think where you spend your time at will truly tell you where your values lie.
Love that. So it's essentially it's those organic things, those things that we take for granted that we think are normal. Just and it's in there all along. Like I do believe that we're born with it, right? Like because God had plans for us from the beginning of time, right? Like I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb, right? So like this gets at that. So really it's just connecting with self. Essentially what you're saying, looking inward, look at what comes organically, what are you feeling in your spirit like when you're having interactions with people? If it feels pressure, do you feel drained afterwards? Like all of those things are definitely indicators of you can keep going or you need to pivot, go left, go right. That was really good. That was really good, Jamel. So have you ever had like any experiences where maybe you started to drift a little bit away from your identity or maybe you weren't moving in alignment with it? And if yes, tell me a little bit about it.
I would like to say like, no, I never had any time where I didn't drift, but I'm definitely not perfect, as we most aren't. But every day we strive to perfection, knowing that we can never get there. So for me, during those times where I do find myself drifting, and or just being a version of myself that is less than who I know I can be. There's three things that I heavily lean on. Like first is my spiritual Sherpas, and it's a bit of a touchy subject to me. So the first one is my best friend who passed away at the age of 28, Jeremy, and also my grandfather that raised me, who's also no longer with us.
Yeah.
And both of them were like the same person, just maybe 70 years apart in age. Both were men of God, both rooted in church. Like Jeremy was a Jehovah Witness. And despite having a little bit of different beliefs, you know, we always found a commonality between the two. My grandfather, when during those times where I don't know what to do or I'm in a situation where I was like, I need some guidance, I always reflect on what would they do in my situation, you know? And based on what I have known about them and what they've taught me, I'm more comfortable in leaning in that understanding in times where it might be a decision that I might not make the best decision.
Uh-huh.
Outside of that, I think the second thing is like just being self-aware and taking a or having an outer body experience and asking yourself like, hey, whatever situation you're in or whatever decision you're about to make, is this going to help you or harm you? If this is going to be for the greater good, then yes, you should do it. Now, if you're operating in a space of being selfish, then you should not be doing this. And then a last thing that I do as a major thing, 'cause there's definitely several other things, is that, I find sources of inspiration. Like one of the things I do when people tell me how I help them via text, I screenshot that and I put it in a folder called Roses.
Love it.
Because I do believe that you should give people their flowers when they're still alive. And, during times where I question myself, like I go back to those text messages that people like, oh, thank you so much. I wouldn't be here without you, or you really changed my life, or whatever that may be. Because sometimes you do forget who you are and you need those words of encouragement. And just leaning on my community in general, I think is really big and important to have a community because they see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And then they often remind you of the best versions of yourself when you don't think so highly of yourself.
Yeah. And I might embarrass you a little bit with this, but I really appreciate that you also model that. That birthday message you left for me, life.
Of
And I
course,
made
of
sure I
course,
saved it for a similar time. Like that sometimes we have those moments where it's like, and then you need to just kind of like reconnect and just like with who you are, why you're doing it, the sacrifices, all the things like as you're moving forward and purpose. So I want to say thank you again for that because I definitely didn't expect it. And I was like, I feel seen. And
of course.
because I do that for other people all the time, it's really important to know and experience that I have people in my life that'll pour into me in that way too. So thank you again
Of
for
course.
pouring in.
I like to say healers need to be healed as well,
We do. We
you
do.
know? And you've definitely have been a impactful force in my life just from everything, all things social work, mental health, and then also just real life. We can have these conversations. Like these are normal conversations that we have on a day to day. And this is just a platform now so others can hear these conversations that we share with each other.
Absolutely, because this topic came out of a conversation we were having. I was like, this is giving podcast. So we just go put some structure to it. Like other people need to hear this. So absolutely. So let's talk a little bit then about you were getting there with like your three things to help you get back into alignment, right? Like if you're kind of drifting, but like talk about accountability, prayer, as well as spiritual discipline and staying grounded in your identity.
Yeah. Okay. Um, So I'll touch on accountability first. I really think that accountability represents transparency with self. Because if you can hold yourself accountable, you're being honest where you need to improve, like you're being honest or taking an honest assessment of where you're at. And then it also allows for opportunities of growth. So, you can't be intentional about your growth if you are not holding yourself accountable. If you are continuously being a version that is less than your ideal self and you're not holding yourself to a standard, then it makes it virtually impossible to grow. So I think of one of like creating a standard for yourself and holding yourself to that standard or like creating goals where it's like, hey, like I have these goals. This is what I'm going to do to get there. And by this day, I'm going to reassess. And, it's okay if you don't always live up to this divine person, but you don't want to live in a constant state of not trying to achieve that. Uh, And for me, when I think of prayer, I look at it as just nurturing your relationship with God, establishing, nurturing with God, and manifesting. Uh, there's something to be said about putting things out there into the universe. When you speak, your tongue has powers. So that's the importance of prayer. And I don't mean silent prayer. I mean, say it out loud.
Yeah.
Tell God what you want. Tell everyone that you meet what you want. And the world will start to give it to you. God will give it to you. He will show it. And it's not so much that God is just like physically putting this in your lap, like, oh, you asked for this here. But you will start to see the world shift in your favor based on the things that you say. But you have to physically speak it out loud. And I like to think of through prayers, we all can be magicians. Like we're creating something out of nothing
Okay.
just by speaking words that we can create for good or for bad.
Yeah. So when you were talking, there's a scripture that came up in my mind, and I'm trying to look at where it is. So basically, our words they don't return void. What is it in James? I'll figure it out because that is really important to speak it. And it's all throughout the Bible to talk to God, tell him what you need, make your request known. And if you say it, you have to really believe it. There's so many good scriptures that go along with that and speaking it into existence. And you're absolutely right when things happen. And then also, right, like if you're thinking about this in the context of like spiritual warfare, Satan is hearing these things, right? So then
Right.
he can't like just get up in your mind or whatever, because now if you're saying these things out loud, that means that that's what it is. And that's all that like that's what he's gonna go on, and so that's why they always say that praise confuses the enemy. So, like, even when you're in those hard seasons and, like, you're saying those prayers and, like, going along with manifesting and speaking, making those I am statements, speaking it as if it is present, it also does something like, is giving your brain also the marching orders. And if you can visualize yourself in these spaces and places in the setting, like living out the thing. Everything else, this brain is it's so dope. Like that, if you could, that's why they always used to say it in like the 90s, right? Like a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but also like if you see it, if you can see it, you could believe it, you can achieve it, right? Is that right? See it, believe it, achieve.
Yeah, that's it. I remember that one.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, there's so many messages about what you can't do, what you shouldn't do. I don't want to give you false hope. All of these very low vibrational, low faith things. And sometimes it comes from people who say that they are believers, but it's like that's not what your words are saying. Those words have power. And one of my friends, your frat brother, actually. We went to the University of Arkansas together, and he was the first one to say to me, "It, don't just think it." Right, because that makes it real. It's out of your head. It's on paper, and then I started doing that. Right, but then what happens is then it ends up in a notebook, nowhere to be found again. Sometimes,
Uh,
and so I've transitioned to making posters that I put up that have like my mantra for the year. And it's like my word for the year. So the be about the business of you statement is essentially what I call it. And then I have like my word for the year. So my word for the year is expansion. And then I make a statement that like really decrees and declares what that expansion like looks like. And then I have my gold bingo card that aligns with all of that. And all three of those are posters. I see them on a daily basis, and it's a reminder, and it's so powerful because you put it out there, your brain sees it, like you're reading it. So when I read, I hear it, all the different ways that our brain is processing it, that everything else just kind of goes to work. And that's like essentially like what you're saying when you put it out there and it starts to come back to you. But also, God, once you start moving, God is going to accelerate it. You talk with Him about it. And if it's in alignment with His will, so even in the middle of my bingo card, my free space is not just a free space. This year, it's abide. With the cross in there, like, that's where I wanna be. I wanna abide in him, in he and me, and, from there, you're gonna continue to, like, just keep bearing fruit, like, you're gonna reap a wonderful harvest, and it's just so interesting. So my mind was just going somewhere. I'm just like, "Dang, girl, you really are a church girl." And, like, people used to call me a goody two-shoe and all these things growing up, but it's like, you I guess that's consistent. When I forget where I heard it, but they were saying how being called a Christian used to be almost like I don't know,
Bad thing.
yeah, like a bad thing or like a slur. They used to say it to like tease. It would be like derogatory, to be called a Christian. And then when you think about growing up, being set apart and different, where you're like, no, I want to do that. Like people, did you ever experience like people like making you feel bad about, or like you said, they called you a nerd earlier, but just like, other times where it's just like, no, that's not me. I'm good on that.
I would say, well, before I jump in that point, I want to go back and stay on that last point for a quick
Spiritual
second.
discipline.
Yeah. So even before that, of saying about manifestation and kind of just like seeing things, and you mentioned like writing it down, and like one repetition is king in your mind. It's a beautiful thing, and if you, like, really use it in IE, like, continuously seeing things that you want, your goals, if you're speaking it to individuals, like, your brain is continuously hearing this narrative, and it starts to unconsciously move towards those things and, like, put you on the path to achieve those things, and also it goes back to accountable. Now you said this out loud to God. Now you said this out loud to individuals. Now people are expecting you to do these things that you say you're going to do. You know, now that you've sat with God and you asked for these things, He's expecting you to take action.
Mhm.
And He's there. He's going to help you. He's going to give you what you need. But He's expecting you to
And you
not
gotta
just,
work.
yeah. So once you speak things and you write things, it's time to go to work. And then the last point on that, spiritual discipline. I think spiritual discipline, it's a direct reflection of your relationship with yourself. If you're disciplined, that's your anchor. And if you don't have spiritual discipline, you can be pulled in each and every direction. It's usually of the direction of the world. It's very easy to get caught up in worldly things because we live in the world, but it doesn't mean we have to be a part of the world. But if you don't have that discipline, like you don't have a strong anchor or foundation, then it's very easy to get swept up in that current.
You know that's a scripture.
I did not know that.
That is a scripture. That is a, and it's so funny that two of the scriptures you're talking about, they're right in the front of my journal that I'm in right now. That's the one about a double-minded man is like a wave being tossed about, unstable in all his ways.
Okay, okay. I
Yeah.
like that.
I
I
was
had
like,
no
and you were
idea.
using the current and the water thing, and I was like, do it.
No, but I do know from personal experience, like
Uh-huh.
it's very difficult to be of the world and living your purpose, which I believe your purpose is given to you by God,
Uh-huh.
where you have to let go those things to truly walk in your purpose.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I found this scripture and it aligns with manifesting and believing and speaking too. So it's in James and where do I want to start? 'Cause, this is actually good. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe, not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double minded and unstable in all they do. That's really just your whole response was summed up in James chapter 1. That was verses 1 through 8.
And I think it's so important. It's so important to understand that and believe that because it would just save you from so much turmoil and chaos outside of the inherent chaos that you need to be a part of your story.
Right.
Think about the Israelites. They could have been home a lot sooner.
Whole lot sooner. Whole lot sooner. And I love what you said there too, which goes with the beginning of this verse too, in that you will have, trials. And that's the chaos. That's that chaos that aids in the becoming, like you said. And so like not everything is spiritual warfare, right? Like, but I guess it can be if you don't make the godly choice, if you don't make the healthy choice, which a lot of times is the hardest choice because it's a narrow road. It's not for everyone. So when you look back on your journey, right, like you made it out of Detroit, you went to Morehouse, like that alone, right, like there's a certain esteem that comes with saying I'm a Morehouse man, or when people hear that, right, like, and then all these other wonderful things that you've done, the fraternity you're in, the way that you give back, even the industry, like, you were working in before, right? Like, how did you, like, maintain still, like, humility and continuing to, like, move forward in your calling and but maintaining your identity?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is this old quote of you put on your pants one leg at a time, just like everyone else. And having that in my mind, like, hey, you're no different than everyone else. Everyone that's struggling, struggle. Like you've experienced struggle, you've experienced poverty, but also those individuals that are successful or those people who are scholars. You're smart, you're rich, you're wealthy. And there's no difference between the person, the impoverished person, and the wealthy person. And you can be whoever you choose to be, but also understanding that everyone else is human as well. And you need to treat people like they're human, and you're no bigger than the greater good or the greater story.
Yeah. And even when you were saying about there's no difference between the wealthy and the impoverished um in that regard, but I think mindset is for anyone because a person could be born wealthy, but if they have like a poor mindset, like, they're not gonna have a good life either. Even though we think that money and like wealth is the answer, like yes, it very much gives us access and can make life easier. But there are still people who have everything and they're miserable.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll say another thing that helps me to be rooted is traveling.
Mhm.
If you have not had the opportunity to go out the country, I know you have.
I know. I thought I was assuming that was for the audience.
Yeah, I know you have. You've been on some jets lately, but if you
Speak
haven't had the
jets.
opportunity,
You better speak them jets into my life. You don't even know what you just did, but go ahead.
oh yeah, but I think it's important for like everyone to go out and to different countries and actually see how other people live. We in America think that we have it bad as far as living conditions, and then you go to somewhere like I remember when I was in Thailand and I saw people walk miles just to fill up water containers at a paid water station to walk back to their place. But you interact with these people, they're happy as can be. Or Guatemala where people were walking like through the jungle and like mountains to get to this hospital to make sure their children had care. But you interact with these people and they had little to nothing, but yet they were rich in spirit. They're rich in like just humility and just like being kind. I think that puts things in perspective. Whatever you think you have, it could be a lot worse. Having a practice of gratitude and appreciation for the things that you do have helps being grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm thinking about Thailand as well when I went, and they were just some of the nicest people. Like traffic was crazy in Bangkok, but outside,
Yeah.
like people are just like just nice and genuine. I really liked Chiang Mai. It was so chill there. What parts of Thailand did you go to?
I've only went to Bangkok. I was supposed to be there for a weekend and got stuck for a week.
That sounds like a blessing. But
It was a blessing. I had some of the best food of my life.
yes, 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 yes. Would you go back to Thailand?
I will go back
Okay, okay. Because I
gladly.
was gonna say I could easily go back because I was there for almost a month, so that's how I was able to do Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and Phuket. And Phuket was not all that it's cracked up to be.
Okay. Is that where the elephant sanctuary is
They
at in Phuket?
they have some up north too. It depends on where you want to be. There's elephants everywhere. In Phuket, now Phuket, I would say go. You don't have to spend a lot of time there because that's like where the big Buddha is. They opened a newer tiger place. I think it's just called like Tiger Park. And it looks a lot more humane, I think, than the one that I visited outside of Bangkok. So it just depends. Because one of my friends, I know she did the elephant sanctuary. Was it in up in Chiang Mai? She did one too, but they have them everywhere. But I did elephants in Phuket too. So anyway, we look traveling. That could be a whole other podcast. But that the people there were absolutely amazing. And I totally agree with you and how travel is a way to just help you be more grateful for what you have and push you to do more because like I remember the first time I went to the continent, we were on a service learning trip. This was my first for real international trip. I
Okay.
didn't
What
count the
part of Africa
Bahamas.
were you in?
Huh?
Where in Africa were you?
So we were in Cape Town. So the school, Howard University School of Social Work does a service learning trip every spring break, and we go to Cape Town. So one of our prior deans, Dr. Kudor Snell, is from Cape Town. And like his family was affected by apartheid and we're displaced. And so with Howard having the black perspective, like in internationalization, being a part of one of our principles, it made sense that we go back. We just going there, you see, just like you're describing, you see what it takes for what we can just hop in our car to go do and we still complain about. And like you said, they have to get up, they have to walk miles, like, or it literally takes a village to do this one thing that we can do individually. And I think one of the things I really appreciated is how like nothing was wasted. They took I saw bottle caps turned into things that I would have never had the mind to think of, but to just make everything into something in that entrepreneurial spirit that's there. And here we're conditioned to just like go into the workforce. So yeah, the like going out of the country, it really definitely shifts your perspective and gives so much. It's so inspiring in many ways. Yeah. Um, okay. Now, this life thing can get tricky and doubt can creep in, maybe even a little self-sabotage, self-betrayal when our no really needed to be no, but we said yes because maybe we didn't have good boundaries yet. Like, have you ever experienced any type of like shrinking or self-sabotage when or questioned your identity?
Well, definitely. Working in corporate America, I can tell you, myself and probably many other Black people show up in these rooms. And definitely in the beginning of your career, I can speak for myself. In the beginning of my career, I definitely walked in these rooms and totally forgot who I was, totally forgot why I was sent there.
Mm,
And I'm in these rooms and I am the only person or one of very few that's in there. And, I stifled my voice. Granted, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like it was the most, I guess, healthy environment for me to use my voice. But for several years, I've definitely walked in those rooms and like just minimized myself, believed that I should just be a fly on the wall. And it took a lot of just conversation with myself to be like, hey, you belong here. You deserve to be here.
mhm.
It also took, to some extent, having an advocate. So you can look at that in the workplace as someone that's championing on your behalf, but you can also look at that in your personal life as like people that are in your life that is one speaking good of you and also um guiding you along the way of like, hey, this is what you should do and this is how you should show up. And then I think of there was like one last point of like thinking of like self-sabotage. And just knowing like, hey, this is where you're at already. Imagine if you decide to be bigger and to think bolder and actually be heard, what can happen? The worst that can happen is like you're not heard, but you're already not heard. So what do you have to lose?
Yeah. It's like you have to, like, once you come into the awareness of it, like, become your own advocate, still take up the space. And it sends a signal, right? Like, even though Jamel's not just going to allow this to happen or just, he is still going to share regardless of how we're moving. And sometimes we can absolutely do ourselves a disservice when we don't take up space. So and I love that you said that too, because it makes me think about a promise I made to myself last year is that I would take up an appropriate amount of space no matter where I went. Not just take up space, but appropriate, because sometimes it is appropriate to go in and you're more quiet and you're listening and you're taking in. Then other times you're the lead, you're somewhere in between, but just allowing yourself to do that. And I think to build on that more, right? Like shrinking and self sabotage, people usually think of those as these huge, grand betrayals of self, or where you know you clearly made a bad choice. And it can be those small things that you're doing when you do that small thing that no one knows about that really goes against your value, where your intuition or that feeling in your stomach, it doesn't feel right and you still go along with it, or you don't speak up, or whatever the thing might be. Like, it's those small things that get us off track, right? That get us to drift out of our identity. And it's small, subtle things. And then when you look, you're like, how did I get over here?
Yeah. And just thinking back to what you just made the point about from shrinking to being your own advocate, that's how I essentially made the jump from hotel, real estate, finance to social work and mental health. It in my career of just, shrinking, but also hearing that voice, like that constant voice of God telling me, like, hey, you're supposed to be doing therapy and not also going to see a therapist.
Absolutely.
We all should be seeing a therapist, but you should be healing others as well. And I knew this. And I had this idea of like, okay, I want to continuously go into the hospitality industry because I told myself this when I was 16. And I was like, let me check this off and then I'll go into therapy and the mental health route. And throughout my career, is like, oh, went from shrinking to advocating for myself because I was getting tired of being mistreated. And let's just say the people that I reported to didn't like that I was advocating for myself. And I think of this quote that Nipsey Hussle said, would you rather be at peace with the world and at war with yourself, or at war with the world and at peace with yourself?
Yep.
And I sat and I thought, like, why am I doing this? Like, yeah, this was a dream that I had to own a hotel, in which
And I
I
remember you
still
telling
will.
me that. And I was like, that's still very dope. And we can connect that with wellness easy.
Yeah, and that's still very, very, like, in the forefront, just it's not the main goal right now. But once I realized, "Hey, what am I doing?" Like, I don't like to be in these spaces and environments. I know what I should be doing, and I've been putting on the back burner. I know you gave yourself this timeline of when you would do it, but forget that timeline. Now is the time. And I had that conversation with myself, and then I think probably like the next day or two, I was submitting the application to UTA to be a part of their social work program. And I look at I self-sabotage myself in that moment because I've known for years, for many years, that I should be a mental health therapist. And I was like, no, because I didn't want to let go of my old life. Like I was progressing in my career, I was making money, I was doing everything that society tells you you're supposed to be doing. Like even I think of like when I left my company back last August. I had just bought a house that May. So imagine in August, you're like, okay, peace. Imma just enroll in school full time, and then I end up still in a struggle not to let go of my old life, accepted a job in DC, moved across country for this job, only for this job to be the worst job I ever worked in my life. Be a terrible experience. So, separated from that company, and then I was like, "Hey, that only happened because you were reluctant to give up your old life and to accept your new life."
Mhm.
So from once that experience happened, I was like, I'm diving head first. I'm 10 toes down, and going to focus in because this is truly the path. And I'm going to continuously have that struggle if I don't release what's not for me anymore.
Mel, there's so much that's in there. Yes, and thank you for really being, like, vulnerable and getting into the specifics so that, like, people can get it, and as you were talking, I was hearing in something that I also experienced in my journey when we try to do things or get comfortable in spaces and places we're not meant to be in long term, God makes us uncomfortable. He makes it so that we can't even ignore it. But like you said, that like reluctance, that resistance, because that was I had to say some resistance prayers, especially last year when I was having to let go of my old life and really and truly walking forward with God. But He makes us uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
I also heard that He's really trying to show you to depend on Him and stop trying to do it your way. Right. And there's different things that come with doing it. Right. Because like you made it out the D, you the Morehouse guy, you know, you have a certain persona or like lifestyle, right? And so we don't always want to give that stuff up. And it doesn't mean that, oh, because you're becoming a social worker or therapist, you can have a good life, but just like the way that it had been, right? And those things that you told 16-year-old you that put the battery in your back, right? Or gave you that extra charge to keep going. And what I'd like to say about like goals and dreams, the only thing better than having them is when you redefine them because you were the creator and the curator of it. So you get to say, what is it going to be?
Right.
And it now you're living like the second part. So you got all that knowledge that you needed in that first part of your career. And now you're in your social work journey, soaking up this education and everything. And God is going to show you, if He hasn't already revealed it to you, how those things are going to come together because all of it is intentional. Like you said, you've known for a long time this is what you wanted to do, needed to do, but also it makes you feel like a success too, right? Like all of this sacrifice was for something. This is my fruit. But God is trying to give you a whole different garden, a whole forest, you know what I'm saying? He's trying to give you something completely different. And you can have a little backyard garden like we used to have with some collards and some peppers and stuff at the back, but he's trying to give you a whole rainforest.
I agree. I think if like, he said, "Hey, you can have this for yourself and just, tend to yourself in whatever very small community that you have. Or you can walk in my plan and purpose and you can be a fisher of men. You can actually cultivate and heal and leave a lasting impact for the better."
Legacy, kingdom legacy. Because I mean that's what we're here for. Oh, this is so good. So we talked a little bit about that self-sabotage. So then how do you like keep going? Because we like you said, what you just went through, you went through some struggles, right? In trying to maintain and hold on to things. Like, how did you keep going? Because you could have been like, man, forget all of this.
I think it's don't get me wrong, I don't say this as this was easy by any feat and telling anyone that, "Hey, yeah, just up and do it." I think you should have proper planning of what you're gonna do, whatever that plan is, because, things aren't gonna work out how you envision it in your head. Whatever you think is gonna happen is gonna happen totally different, so you need to plan those things out to see, okay, if this happens, how do I respond? But also, I think the most important thing is that you have to have faith. Like, if you don't have faith, if you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe this is what God is telling you to do, if you don't believe in God, then what are you doing it for? Don't make the change if you don't believe,
Mm.
because you're going to be tested. And if you don't have that faith, you have to lean on that faith time and time and time again because it's going to be difficult. I know in this current season, I have so many different difficulties and uncertainties. And I'll just say, like, one, I would have never expected to be paying a mortgage and rent at the same time. That wasn't in the plan. I did not budget for that.
Yeah, like you said, even though you planned,
But you got to figure it out. And like during those times, like difficult times, you leaning on that faith. Like, I truly believe I am making the right strides and I'm walking in the path that is destined for me. And with that, I am willing to bet it all on myself. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. And also, I also don't advise this for everyone else, but I will say my upbringing has shaped how I view certain things. And it is a really raw and rigid outlook at times. And the thing that helps me get through, like, there's no plan B.
That's given survival mode.
Yeah, like, it's not for me, I look at it as like, "Hey, if this doesn't work out, Imma do something else." Like, there's no something else. This is working out. So, what that is working out is, like, you have to put everything that you have into it, and, everything does not work out as planned. Everything may not come to fruition, and I can live with that. I can't live with the fact of, like, "Hey, I didn't try and I didn't give my all," because, of course, it didn't work out if you didn't give your all.
And it's that is a thing that people tell themselves, "Well, I knew it wasn't gonna work out, so." No, you didn't. Like, if you knew it wasn't gonna work out, you wouldn't have done it, but also you like you said, it was a very half-hearted or not a wholehearted effort. So how could you expect to have the optimum outcome? Like, we really going back to what you were talking about with, like, the power of words and, like, we have to give ourselves permission, and I think that's a hard thing to do, to just say, "We're taking off the training wheels," all of that, like, we're just going to do it, because why not? Why not? If we're gonna do it, let's do it. And you don't have to be perfect, but just going forward, taking a step, taking that leap of faith that and it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. So, what you've done is very brave, right? Has anyone question what you're doing? Like, why would you like leave, you why and social work, like what are you doing and why? Or have you struggled at all with comparison, seeing what like some other folks are continuing to do because they stayed on this a linear path, but yours wasn't, a linear one.
So of course, with every decision, there's gonna be someone that questions like the moves that you make. Some can argue it's good for people to question. I think of the move to social work, heard things, why would you want to do that? You're making great money. You're making like over six figures. Like there's no money in social work. And one, I state I'm doing this because I want to do this. This is how I see my life. And two, I think of most fields like there's money anywhere. You just have to be creative and know how to get to it. But for me, that wasn't my purpose.
Mhm.
So if it's not my purpose, like it doesn't even matter. But I think a lot of times people, definitely in our society, they champion like, oh, you're gonna make a ton of money if this career doesn't pay X amount of dollars, then it's like no use to go into it. Where it's like, hey, look, I am going to it for the aspect of leaving an impact, of like having a sense of fulfillment when I wake up every day, that it doesn't feel like work, where it feels like I am making a difference. So, people may have questioned, honestly, I don't give it too much thought because at the end of the day, whatever you think is not going to change how I feel or impact me and like how I live. So like I got too much going on to even allow that to occupy my mind any longer than the moment that it came in and it left in that same breath.
That's good. That's good. And as you were talking, that whole notion of like money is really cheating people, scamming people out of purpose because they are really relinquishing like fulfillment and purpose in exchange for money. They really and truly are. And
Yeah.
also, what I hear too is with you knowing what you were supposed to be doing and not doing it for many years. And then you're like, okay, all right, God, like, there's nothing that could be said because I'm sure you had those conversations with yourself over the years, right? Like before making the shift and coming back to.
I do. I did until I fully submitted, where I was like, you win. I fully submit to your will. But also, of of this podcast of being centered around um, personal journeys and stories in mental health. I will say other things that I do incorporate that helps me when I am in my head or things where, it becomes a bit too noisy. So meditation, I don't have a consistent practice right now, but there are times where I've developed a practice of like meditation where it helps silence the noise. For me, running is another thing that kind of like help silence the noise. So, all of the critics, it kind of helps being present with yourself, which I think is really important. That's how you stop or not lean into comparisons of like being present in the moment. So going out into nature and connecting with nature is really good for me. So it's just important to like find ways that can bring you back to now. And other times I think I would do things like, limit or totally cut out social media. Whereas, okay, I find myself comparing myself to someone else indoor. I want to be outside playing or taking trips right now. It's not the season for you to be taking trips and playing right now. This is the season for you to be buckled down. And if I have difficulty accepting that, I'll just remove myself from that environment. But just like everyone else, I definitely struggle. But those are some tips and I guess coping strategies that I use to make sure that I'm in the present and I don't let outside distractions affect me.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. And you ran your first marathon within the
I
last year,
did.
right?
Ah, a true journey, a true journey, So I ran the New York Marathon at the beginning of November. And before I ran the marathon, I used to always say, life is a marathon, sprint the marathon. After training for a
Sprint the
marathon,
marathon? That's wild.
yeah, and I'll say that this was a life mantra.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking of like growing up in Detroit and just like my situation when I arrived at Morehouse, I was behind the curve for a lot of things. Like, I didn't come from an affluent family. I didn't have a lot of exposure education wise because I went to Detroit public schools. So I felt like I needed to catch up in a lot of different ways. One of these internships, I felt like I still needed to catch up. So, I kept going and going and going and going. And I always was like, you gotta just be on. It was happening and I didn't know it was happening. I was getting burnt out. I was getting burnt out. But, training for a marathon puts things in perspective. So um, I use this as that running a marathon and training is a representation of life. So now training for this marathon where I realize like it doesn't matter how hard you go. That's not going to get you to the finish line. It's about consistency. It's about showing up every day, like for training. And it also keeping the goal in mind. The goal is to finish. It isn't to get there by a certain time. So when I ran the marathon, I had injured myself like a month and a half, 2 months before I had sprained my ankle. Had saw a couple of physical therapists, and they cleared me to run. And so I ran probably that week before the marathon. Get to the day before or the day of the marathon, I run. After the first 4 miles, I feel my ankle tweak. I still have 22 point was it 22.6 or whatever that distance is. I still have that left to run. And I ran it. Some of it was walking, but for me, the goal was to finish. And it was like, hey, look, you might have had this time in mind or whatever, but you're not going to get that. That doesn't mean you're going to stop. And I had to lean on different times the love that I was getting from the crowd, the support from the people who flew in from all over the US to see me because there were points of the race, definitely in mile 13, where I was like, I'm about to just give up. I can't do this. I can't believe I thought I would run a marathon as my first race and I'm not a runner. Yeah, I was not a runner before that.
Mhm.
To be like, why would I think I could do this? And then I had to lean on that love to will me through. And, it was a true representation of like one, when you don't have enough, you have to lean on your community and they will give you enough. And two, it was like, run your race. It don't matter how fast somebody else is going, don't matter how someone else is going. As long as you're running your race and you stick to the goal, which is to get across that finish line, everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love that because when you run your race, you will be in first place every time.
Right.
And but that's the problem is we're looking in other people's lanes and not our own. That was really good, really good. So, what would you say really are some key life lessons? Or actually, I want to come back to the marathon thing. So you were saying you had a life mantra of sprinting the marathon. Now, having actually gone through a marathon, the challenges and things, have you changed that mantra? And if so, what's the mantra now?
What you call it? I have changed that mantra. 'Cause life is a marathon, not a sprint. Run your race. The goal is to finish, not to burn out.
That love that, love that. Before I hit you with the signature question, are there any other things that you would like to share, just maybe to encourage the listeners or like just some gems that have really carried you along the way?
I thought I dropped a lot of
You
gems in
did?
here already. If I have to give a couple of more, I will gladly do so.
And we're
Uh,
gonna soak them all up.
I think it's really important for like everyone to be kind to yourself, you know, and taking a step back of like, hey, we all been through things, some things that we haven't been proud of. It's okay, life happens, but forgive yourself because if you don't forgive yourself, you're going to hold yourself back from a lot of different things. So not only forgive yourself, forgive your parents, forgive anyone who trespassed against you, you know. And then two is like, hey, don't be afraid. Or like, life is gonna be scary. You know, change is hard, transition is hard and difficult, but it signifies growth. And the only thing that's scarier than growing is being stagnant. And, if you're not growing, you're decaying. So I think it's really important to, be okay. Take that leap of faith, accept that new job, take that mentor role or whatever it may be, or go on that trip, answer that text from that person that you met to go to Bible study. You never know. It could change your life, literally.
Literally. All right, well, that's good. That is good. And so I do that, and then people are like, "Man, I should have saved that for the signature question," right? And but like you said, like there's so many gems that are throughout here, and so I'm like, whatever you dropping, we're gonna take. So if you could leave the audience with one powerful truth to help them to rise in faith and thrive in purpose, what would it be?
Hmm. Be the person that you needed to be. So, and I say that, whoever the younger version of yourself needed, be that person in the world and show up for others as that person.
That is good. Because, a lot of people will say, I didn't have it, but sometimes we still know what we needed. Yeah, that was good. Well, thank you so much, Jamel. This has been so good, so rich. I appreciate your vulnerability. And I really appreciate that this platform allows me to get to know people more deeply and just like how they think and how they experience things, but more than anything to really just talk about God. So it makes me feel that much more connected to people, even though I've known you for almost a decade. Um, I know, right? Time goes so fast.
Yeah. So, and I also like to say thank you for having me, Dr. J. Nicole. I remember you just Jeannie. Now you Dr. J. Nicole, you and all glowed up and you're doing great things, moving very fast, a mile a minute, a mile a minute. But it's all great work that's needed. And I can't think of a person who's better equipped to do it than you. I know your story on like and the things that you've been through and like how you're now leaving an impact to others. So I want to give you your flowers on your platform and to say that you're a light that is shining so bright and just leaving a imprint and impact on so many people's lives, including myself. And just want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. Thank you for all of the good work that you're doing. And I am also looking forward to continuously seeing what you have in store next.
Thank you. Thank you. You about to make me cry. I'm over here tearing up. I ain't gonna lie. So yes, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, audience. So this is where we shift to you, where I want to encourage you to reflect. Are you living from a place of identity or are you living from a place of imitation? And then I want you to take action. So I want you to write down who God says you are and build habits that support that truth. And finally, I'm going to leave you with an affirmation. I am becoming who God created me to be, and I will not lose myself on the way. I want to thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole. Today's special guest was Jamel Riley, and I hope to see you next time. Remember, the merch is available, so you can go online, go to www.evolvewithdrjnicole, go to the podcast page, and you can click shop the merch and wear your fave. Episodes drop every Tuesday morning. We are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And Jamel, I look forward to having you back to have that talk about boundaries.
Thank you. I look forward to being back.
All right. Well, take care, everyone, and I will see y'all next time.
Take care.